before I start, the one thing I want to remind people is I don't do any social media. I don't do Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. I'm thankful to get the opportunity to speak with audiences like yours, Jennifer, and present here some thoughts. But beyond that, I'm not anywhere. And there has been some stuff that's been put up as though it's me. And if you see that, it's not me. And I think it's inappropriate. It's not courteous that some people are trying to portray themselves as having messages from me or I think there was even some money that was being asked for. I don't ask for money. I don't need anybody's money. I don't want any money. And I'm not promoting specific causes in that way. It's just not my lane. So if you see that, no, it's not me. And probably just mention that, that's not something that, they may be wanting to honor me or something like that. I appreciate that. And I think that's neat, but it's not fair to people to try to make them think that I'm saying stuff that I'm not saying. So with that in mind, what kind of stirred me to want to give this message today? I was listening to the interview you did with Monica and about her father and how he was having night terrors and was literally wrestling in his sleep with apparitions or demons, and it was in this great fear. And then that led to an encounter with Monica and her praying with him and bringing him to a prayer of salvation. And this is, end of life discussion is maybe the most important part of life itself. People get so caught up. We're caught up in what's happening politically, business, family, sports, everything else. And I remember I was with someone close to me, and we were just leaving a movie theater and turning our phones back on. And a call came in, and I saw the face, the expression, and knew something serious had just happened, and paused at the car to allow the phone call to be completed. And you could tell with the tears that something had just happened. And it was about someone that was close to this person. As it turned out, this person who I had known since they were just out of grade school, I remember when they were small enough that they could only fit in the back seat of my Jag, which nobody else could fit in because it's too small. And had to put the top down so they get in and out. And the smile, the fun, the laughter. And this person had been raised by her parents, the grandparents. The parents had been, got into drug sales and usage, and they both went to prison for a period of time. The mother got out first, and then the father after many years. But this young girl had been raised by her grandparents. And as she got into her teen years and into her latter teen years, the kinds of dramas that happen when families are broken up, and she herself got into some mild drug use, but also into some of the spirit stuff. And part of the problem is the gangs that are always present. And when you have broken up families, there's usually financial issues and things like that. And she fell in with the crowd. And so there was just the people around where she was at. And some of these were gangs that we know here, Crips and Bloods and things like that. And then some of them are these gangs that have been imported from south of the border. In this case, the MS-13 gang had a strong presence in this broad area. And so she had reached a certain point where she had decided that she had an experience that she would equate as being almost a near-death experience. It wasn't a classic NDE, but she literally felt demon spirits pulling her into the abyss, and it scared her tremendously in some of their things. And if you look at MS-13, they have these tattoos. I remember one specific one of a person I was dealing with at a particular point in time, and it was literally the claw of a beast with huge nails on it on the shoulder of this man, and with intricate detail in the tattoo. And I'd asked the person about that. He says, "That's my demon. He has his hand on my shoulder. And if I don't do what he wants, he can pull me into the pit at any time." And he said that if he had to kill to keep a few more days of life, to keep from the law getting him, then he would kill if that's what his demon told him to do. And they do a sacrifice of an innocent just to, avoid getting caught by the law. It is horrid to imagine to, a normal, peaceable mind. But in his world, that was a very reasonable thing to do. It made sense. And so this young girl, the father and her father, when he was in prison, there had been prison ministry. And he had actually become a Christian, began attending a church in the prison. I believe he was in for about 5 years. And learned a trade, got out, moved to another city a couple hundred miles away, got his house in order. The younger siblings to this young gal, the parents got them back out of foster care and took care of them. She was with the grandparents. And so they established a household, and mother and father, but the father really pressed hard. He wanted his daughter to come down and be with them. And they'd found a new church that they were in, small little community church that did have outreach to people with drug issues as he had. And some people in the church gave him a job, and he was doing some construction related stuff, and had began to put a life together. And so this young gal went to that city, spent time with them, and after a few days went to a church service, and then they decided to go to a midweek service. It was a Wednesday night service. There was only a handful of people there. As I remember, there was only a dozen or so people besides the pastor and one or two other people, this young street minister pastor. But that pastor gave a message, and this young girl at 19 years of age received Christ into her life. And it was because of these terrors and what she had felt, and she realized that she was right at the edge of the abyss. And her father was just beside himself, ecstatic, and so thankful to God for, bringing his family all together, and the mom and brothers were so excited. And so she decided that she wanted to move to where her parents were at. And she wanted to go back to the city that she had been raised in and get some belongings together, say her goodbyes with her grandparents, say goodbye to her cousin who lived in the area about 10 miles away. And then come back down and move in with the parents and actually start getting into this kind of life, be part of this church, this small church body, etc. She was very excited. She was ecstatic about this. And so she came back on a Saturday and was doing everything, getting ready to go. She was going to only be there for a few days before she left to go home. Went over to see her cousin, spent some time with the cousin, and was catching the bus to go back home. And while she was at the bus stand, there was other girls from this neighborhood that were there, kind of a hangout area. And, you know, she was talking about excitedly going back down to the city and moving in with her parents and getting to spend time with them that she hadn't had all these years, that were kind of stolen from them, and starting a new life. And across the street, on this very busy street, a car pulled up, and two very young men got out of the car. And apparently one of them had a girlfriend who was 13, who was standing in this crowd of girls who had broken up with him. And he was an MS-13 gang member. Both the guys in the car were. And they opened fire and fired over a dozen rounds at the crowd, but aiming at this one 13-year-old girl. One of the rounds hit this young girl in the neck that I'd known for all these years. And over the next few minutes, she passed out. Aid units were called, police, everybody was on their way. The other girl fell dead beside her, 13 years old. It was a rough enough neighborhood at that point in time that this 13-year-old was scared enough. She had a gun in her purse, 13 years old. She had a gun in her purse. This was somebody that was known, but not, you know, like close friends or something, that she was just at the bus stop. She didn't know any of these people doing the firing, didn't know the girl really that had died, but she had been in that kind of a neighborhood. You don't know sometimes when something's going to happen, even if you have a premonition, even if you know that there's a diagnosis and there's some imminent moment coming, that you have to be ready. Maybe you can fight it, maybe you can win. I remember a very close friend of mine, very close friend, 30 years, and he called me that he'd been diagnosed with kidney cancer. And I dropped what I was doing and flew back and was there when he got out of the hospital and cared for him and hoped that we had got it all with the one kidney being removed, but it didn't turn out to be the case. And so over the next several months, worked with him to get his estate affairs in order, deal with the children, make changes to the will, which needed to be done because it wasn't really set up right. It was done a couple decades earlier and circumstances had changed. And spending all the time working through the issues with him. And then even his closest family, it was so hard that, as is often the case, they just couldn't bear to be around him, watching him wither away. And so I did get the blessing, the opportunity to spend those last weeks with him 24 hours a day and right up to his last moments. And I remember falling asleep in the hospice care over in the corner of the room, and just from exhaustion, as family members had come to see him and say goodbye, and waking up with a nurse on my shoulder that he's gone. Well, I'd been awake. I didn't realize I'd even fallen asleep. And she said, you know, a lot of times it's like the angels when they're coming to take someone. They'll just put people to sleep around them for a moment. And that was how I felt. And we'd known it was coming. I prayed the Lord's Prayer with him when he was still with it a few days earlier, and he'd made his peace. Terrible struggles. I remember him calling someone that was a former spouse and reconciling with them in those last weeks, and a very tearful moment. People sometimes know that something like this is coming. And other times you have no clue. You don't even realize that something's at the door. You know, us as a country, people are seeing all of these events going on around us, all of the drama of the last few months, and this impending doom. As you know, I was on the other side of the world as this outbreak was happening, and I was actually headed for Beijing in the course of my travels, and would have been there as this really started to reach its crescendo, and had to stop and turn around midway through all of that. You know, the whole world has had to stop and take a breath. Maybe some people saw this coming this way, but for most of the world, this was a shock, and they didn't see it. Sometimes these types of change moments, this standing at death's door, you know it's coming, and other times it catches you completely by surprise. And I think that even for us as a nation, that may very well also be the case. People didn't or don't necessarily see that the national body politic, us as a country, we're going on and the economy's coming back and there's all this political divide and people are seeing, you know, it's great, it's horrible, it's whatever. They're going on with life, and suddenly this event happens. And I would look at this very much as one of those events where, just as is talking with that gentleman with the tattoo of his demon on his shoulder, the demon was trying to pull him back to the pit. We as a country have had a demon, a dark angel over America that's been trying to pull us into the pit continuously, right there, that hates us, that hates what we stand for, that wants to enslave us and enslave the rest of the world, to complete that enslavement. And we're seeing all these events around us within our communities, and it's almost akin to a near-death experience. We're getting a glimpse of what the other side of these events would be like if they were allowed to continue. You know, I think of near-death experiences. A lot of times people have different types of experiences, a heavenly experience or a hellish experience. I had another close friend, Henry, and Henry was, when he was a small boy, his mother had some drug problems and died. And they lived in a town north of Dallas. And so the people that were there in the community, nobody really wanted to deal with the child. This was in an era when child protective services were pretty sketchy. And so an elderly couple in church in that community, and there was only one church in the town. It was that kind of a small town, just a few families here, and this girl had been traveling through. And so they said, well, we'll take the child while we figure out what we got to do. So they took this young boy who was only 4 or 5 years old at the time, and they took him in. He was black, they were white. They took him in when they were in their early 70s. And it was only going to be temporary. But they had a farm, they had a couple of acres, they had a few horses, and he'd been a horseman all of his life. And he'd been a horseman all of his life, and he you know, the little boy liked it, liked their food, liked to be around them, had a great instant smile, very easy to please, wanted to please. He was just a very good little boy. And one thing led to another, and a few weeks ended up being months, ended up being a few years, to where it would have been very hard to separate that little boy from those parents, those folks. And so Henry had exposure to the church, Baptist church that they went to. And Henry, when I knew him, was in his mid-20s. He was struggling a bit, and I actually, he lived, had a extra place at my residence, and let him stay there with me. And so one day we were talking, something had happened, I don't remember what it was, but it brought up death experiences. And I talked about sometimes people have pretty unusual events that happen near the time of death or at death. And he says, well, I had something like that. And I said, really? You did? Well, yeah. I mean, that's why, when my dad was alive, because he talked about his adopted dad as his dad. It's the only dad he ever knew. And we were on the porch. And where I grew up, it gets real hot in the summer. And so we were on the porch, and it was in the middle of the afternoon, and it was so hot. And I brought out some lemonade, and my dad and I were sitting on the porch, and it was so hot. And his dad was talking to him, and then all of a sudden he says, Henry, close that gate. And he was looking over at the pasture where the horses were, and the gate was closed. He says, Henry, close that gate. The horses are going to get out. Close it now. And Henry says, I looked at that gate. That gate was closed. I know how to close a gate, and that gate was closed. And he says, Henry, you got to get over there and close it. Those horses, those are the most beautiful horses I've ever seen in my whole life. Those horses are so beautiful. They're pure white. They're the most beautiful horses I've ever seen, Henry. Look at that. And Henry was looking. He couldn't see any horses, and he didn't see an open gate. He says, Henry, close the gate now before they get loose. And then he started to stand up, got out of his chair, and was going to walk down the porch and head over to the gate to close the gate because Henry wasn't closing it. And Henry was getting up, and then his dad fell over. And he says, I've never seen such green grass in my whole life, as he's laying on the porch, pointing over at the gate and the horses. That's the most green grass. Those are the most beautiful horses I've ever seen, Henry. Come on, let's go. And his father passed away. I remember Henry talking to me about that. It was very emotional. It's emotional for me now, even just remembering it. And I said, Henry, God gave you a gift. Your dad gave you a gift. He got to tell you what he was seeing the instant before he passed over and where he was going. That's one of the greatest gifts you could have ever gotten given in your whole life, to know that he's okay, that he's fine, that what he saw in those last moments in this world, and seeing with divine vision, perfect vision. Henry was struggling, and that was something I think he needed to be reminded of. Even just getting to share it with me helped him remember lots of things from when he was a kid, and there was trouble, difficult times for him. His mom passed away shortly thereafter, and he was somewhat on his own. Didn't really fit in there, and didn't feel like he fit in other places, and ended up half a world away with me. We have events happening to us as a country we're getting a glimpse, heaven and hell, a heavenly path, a hellish path, and then we have to make this choice. And it's not something you get a pass on. You have to make a choice. There's sins of commission, things that you do, and sins of omission, things that you fail to do, that you don't do. And choosing a path, that's an act, that's a function. You have to put one foot in front of the other and go one way or the other. And if you don't, stand in the middle of the road, you're just going to get run over. We have seen these riots. We've seen and heard these plans that people had for us, wanting to have passports that you've got your vaccine shot. And so now you're safe to come out of your house and function in the community, go to work, go to school. And a type of internal worldwide passport. This controlling effort to turn us into someone else's slaves for their machine, for their function, for their work. And the pushback that's happening, this waking up across America that's happening right now. General Washington, as the country was in this formative moment at the beginning of the United States of America, at Valley Forge, I believe it was, wrote of having had a dream or a vision of the future of America. And in that dream, he says he saw three great conflicts for America. The first one with the motherland, England, and this fight for independence. And then he saw another conflict out in the future, and he said it was a great conflict where every brother was bringing up arms against their brothers, a civil war, which of course we know about. And then he saw a third great conflict afar off, and it was like the second, some type of an internal civil war. All the great cities in flames, and no one left save the countryside dwellers. And then some kind of resolution to that and a rebuilding of the country again. We think of prophets like Jonah, who saw and had to go prophesy the destruction of Nineveh. And he gets there and prophesies it and tells everybody what's going to befall him. But then the people repent and Nineveh is spared. And Nineveh was a very evil, wicked city that had been very evil towards the Jews, and yet God spared them. So is Jonah not a prophet? Because what he prophesied about the fate of Nineveh ended up not happening quite that way, that they were spared from destruction, from judgment by God for that generation. No, Jonah was a prophet of God, but the people repented. They changed the future. They changed their fate, pushed whatever judgment was there further out into the future, and spared their generation. We have this moment. We're seeing this dark side of America, and those people that wish us evil and doom and gloom are desperately clawing away, trying to pull us into the abyss. And the question is, how are we going to avoid this fate that they have in mind for us? What's the path? What's the way forward to avoid that fate? I'm thinking of one of the people that had a near-death experience that has talked about it, and he was a Army Ranger, I believe. One of the things he said is, I fear no man. his fighting skills, his strength, muscles on muscles on muscles. And he had a near-death experience that was out of the blue at a fairly young age. And suddenly, in an instant, found himself falling in some kind of pitch black darkness that was so thick you could feel the density, and yet he couldn't feel the floor, ground, anything under his feet. A darkness so dark you can't see anything, but you sense it, it's there, and yet you can't see anything. And he was there for some time trying to get his bearings and had this sense of falling. And it happened so quickly, so instantly, it caught him completely by surprise. And he hadn't really thought of an afterlife, hadn't thought of heaven or hell. He'd certainly dispatched some to one or the other in his life, but hadn't fully really, as he has said, thought of it himself. And then suddenly a demon appears out of nowhere that is way bigger than he is. He's, as I recall, said the demon was 12 feet tall. And for some reason, he knew exactly how tall this demon was. And it was hideous in its appearance, had horns coming out of the sides of its mouth. And it grabbed him on the shoulder, but the pain went through his whole body, because in that spirit realm, in that particular kind of physicality, you have a body, but it's not exactly the same as what you have here in the world. And so when you have pain, you feel it everywhere in the body at the same time. And so this demon knew what he had done, the way he grabbed him would cause pain, took some glee in it, and then went running off, flailing him around like a rag doll. He had no power, no strength. He couldn't overcome it. With all of his earthly strength, he had no power of resistance to do anything to stop this monster dragging him. And he knew he was being taken to hell. And it was running and running and running. And he had several encounters along the way as he was headed for hell, other demons wanting to grab him and take him away from the demon that had him, like he was a prize, and being torn at and fought over. And in the course of all this, somewhere in his being, he wasn't a spiritual person that recalled. He wasn't, someone that had ever really thought of or spoken much to God, but it came out of him somewhere, and he called out for help from God, save him. And way off out in the distance, and his recollection is a much longer story. I'm abbreviating it tremendously. But he knew he was right just a moment from forever being in hell for eternity, this place that he was being taken to. And he called out for God's help. And in the distance, he saw just a pinpoint of light, but it was racing at him, and it was getting bigger. And as he watched it coming at where he was at, it got larger and larger until all of a sudden it was an angel. And he recognized that angel, looked like a man. And he said that angel was exactly, I believe he said, 9 feet tall. For some reason, he knew the height. And it was Michael, the archangel. And Michael hit this demon exactly in the right place on the jaw, so that he released his grip. If he hadn't hit him just exactly right, this man said he knew he'd have been crushed or broken in two by this claw that had a hold of him. It was so powerful. But Michael hit him just exactly right on the jaw, and it was like a cartoon image of this demon flying off out in the distance and landing on its backside some great distance away. And this man being there splayed out, and then being raised to his feet by Michael. And this demon got up and was running back, but he was escorted away by Michael and saved, and then had a divine encounter, changed his life, changed his world, changed everything about him. those kinds of recollections by people having near-death experiences, we hear them over and over and over. If, as I'm portraying to you, Jennifer, we as a nation are getting a glimpse of what was there for us in these events, the way these people wanted to change our country, change our fate, lock us into their future, their designs, their prison. And we're getting a chance to get a taste of that. Are we as a country having some kind of a near-death experience? Some national equivalent of a near-death experience? And to see what it might be like under these masters, where they expect us to bow our knee to them, to bow our knee to their rituals and their political correctness, and get our passes to function, to interact, to meet, to be a nation based on their blessing, their okay, their way, and ultimately to their God. You see, one of the things that happened also just in the last few days, we had this interesting event that happened with the storm last week, and I had numerous people that contacted me even as the storm was closing in on Washington, D.C. and predicting a weather event. And one of my close acquaintances lives where he can actually look over downtown Washington, D.C., can actually see the Washington Monument right there in front of his residence off in the distance, and not that far away. And so we had this storm event. And, you know, Jennifer, I think on your channel and on several other channels, I've talked about that this Washington Monument is really a occult ritual symbol for the Isis Osiris cult, this ancient Babylonian cult, Roman cult, Egyptian cult that has got its claws into America. That Washington Monument, it's a stake in the heart of America for their religion to hold us, and that the country is built around in so many ways. And even those people that don't think that it's that dire, Washington, D.C., the whole city is essentially an occult church to Satan, Lucifer, the devil, Lucis. One of the interesting correlations to that, I might add, by the way, that happened over the weekend. But this battle that we're having, Jennifer, it's not just a political battle. That's one of the themes within the Q project that is emphasized over and over and over. This deep state that we're fighting is not just a political deep state, not just a businessmen getting their business interests taken care of. There is a religious deep state. That deep state goes through the churches, Protestant, Catholic, all of them have this deep state within them also. One of the interesting things that happened Saturday was that Archbishop Vigano, who has been opposed to things happening out of Rome and by this Pope, and has taken a very hard stand against some of these events. He wrote an open letter to President Trump and identified that within the church, they were having the same fight as the president was having here in the United States with this entrenched deep state crowd that's trying to create a globalist empire that they rule and control the whole world. And they're doing that within the church because, of course, such a large portion of the Earth's population identifies as being Catholic. And so if you can capture that operation from the inside all the way to the top, you can manipulate and control a huge swath of the Earth's population. And so Archbishop Pagano has drawn the line for Catholics and identified these evils taking place in the church that he and others of like mind are in opposition to. And so in that letter, he makes one very critical point. He identifies this Masonic order operating within the church as part of this deep state that is trying to divert the church in its direction. Well, that's something that we have a problem with here in the United States. The group that built the Washington Monument and that crowd around it. It's a Masonic group. There's other cults in here too. They're interrelated. They're interacting. It's not solely that. But again, even within the church, as Leo Zagami, another Catholic priest, talks about frequently and has written many books about, while I have a slightly different opinion about some of the value of and sincerity of the origins of some of the people in the Masonic order, he says it was a good order in its early days within the church and was doing good things, but that it's been diverted and it's been used and is now a force for evil within the church. Like so many things, it comes in under one hat and then the true nature is revealed as time goes on. That was one of the things happening in the book of Adam and Eve, where the devil would come in as an angel of light and get them fooled into going down a certain path, beguiling them again, if you will, as it happened at the garden. And it's only as they get further and further away from where God had planted them and was protecting them, and where they became more and more vulnerable, that they realized that this was not the good angel that they thought it was, that this was this dark evil angel. And God protected them and brought them back out of danger on numerous occasions as they were learning to understand and not fall victim to the latest lie of the devil, to understand his nature, and there was no good side to him, so that they were more wary and not to be easily deceived again in the future. We as a people have had several events happen, both in the election period in 2016 and post-election, and since the inauguration of President Trump, where we've gotten to see the true nature of the people in this deep state operation who want to control us, to take control of the country, to hold control of the country. And it's not even a political left and right. It's not a Democrat-Republican thing. The Republicans hated Trump too. They didn't want him. Look at the Bushes. No, this is something different. This is a good versus evil contest that we're in. And Pagano points out correctly this spiritual side to this battle, and then sides with the president, sides with the truth community here in America that is opposing these people that want to take us down this dark path to global domination by a few corporate trillionaires, and using schemes to get us to sign away our living rights to live under their rule, them protecting us, them organizing us, taking care of us. Well, we don't need to be taken care of. They think that they're their brother's keeper. I don't want a keeper. I want a brother. And but that's not the way they view us. They view us as less than human, because we're merely human. They consider themselves more than human because they believe that they are descendants of Cain, who himself was a product between Lucifer and Eve. That's their belief. It doesn't matter if you believe it. It doesn't matter if you can't find it in the Bible. That's not the point. That's what they believe. This is a religion.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the midst of a spiritual war. And so at this point, they realize how serious this is. It's so advanced. The opportunities to prevail, to win against the president and the people forming around him as he continues to consolidate power here in America, the ability to own the minds of the American people with their deceptions through the media, through the advertising, through the false stories and the false flags. People are waking up. Gulliver is rising up and pulling all of their ropes off. And we're not taking their lies, their deceptions lightly. They're wearing very thin. And so they're getting desperate. And those that are still under illusions, those that are still under their spell, their control, are doing their work, acting as their minions, trying to pull us back into their pit because they know what damnation lies ahead for them. And we have to consciously make a choice. I'm reminded of another story that, of somebody that had a near-death experience. A friend of mine, Glenn, and he wrote a number of books. He did a lot of work. We had known each other for a number of years, and I helped him get a couple of radio interviews because he had an interesting story, and was doing interesting work, fun work. We didn't agree on religious stuff in most areas. There was basic things we agreed on. There were some other things we didn't agree on. But one of the things that was interesting about Glenn was he, as a young boy, had gone to a back part of his, I believe it was his grandparents' farm. And there was a swing by a river where he was visiting. And he'd gone on this swing. He didn't have anybody else around at the time. He'd just gone back there because he liked it and it was cool and he knew how to get there. And so he was on this swing, swinging away, and it was the board for the swing was kind of rotten. And so as he was swinging away, the board broke.
Oh, no.
And when it broke, because he was doing what you do on a swing, trying to kick out and go further out, and being boys, you got to go as high and far as you possibly can because it's more fun. That's the way it's done. You want the Jaguar, and then you got to get the Ferrari after that because it's not fast enough either. So he's kicking out, and the swing breaks. And the way that this was positioned on this tree, there was a tree root that had gotten kicked out from underneath the area where you would push out in the swing. And so it was kind of bare, and it was a big, thick tree root. And when he landed with the back of his head squarely on that tree root. Oh. And it knocked him out cold. And people that do stuff within the martial arts and things like that will tell you it only takes 3 pounds of pressure at the base of the skull to knock somebody out. So, but you have to be very artful where you do it and how you do it. It looks easier in the movies than it is in real life, that's for certain. And it's absolutely an art form, obviously. But he got enough of a hit right there. He was out, done. And so as he would tell the story, he felt himself falling up and falling higher and higher until some angels, he didn't realize they were there to begin with, but he recognized that at some certain point he had angels on either side of him. They were escorting him to the light. And he has a very interesting take in stuff that he shared. And I heard this as when he was an adult. This happened when he was a young boy, but there was something that he shared specifically that to me, I had not heard from anybody else. And it was a very unique observation that just had this ring to me of some kind of a divine, that's the way God would do it. And what he said was, at a certain point in this great city that he was taken to, this heavenly city, he was shown a huge building. It was very tall and it was very long. You almost couldn't see the end of it. And it was all glass. And inside this building, he could see that there was desks or booths, and that there was people all through this building, and they were there and they were seated in these booths. And he asked the angels what this was, and the angels said, well, you would understand it as a kind of a library of books, and you would see all of this. What these people are doing is they are reading the books of the life of every person that they've ever had in contact with. And they're reading them not like we read a book with your eyes, but they're actually reading them from the inside out. They're feeling every emotion, tasting every taste, smelling the air. They're seeing it from inside the other person's life, their eyes, their hands, their feet, every sensation. And they're seeing how they were received, how they were reacted to, things that were done to them. You get to see how the other person felt walk in their shoes. And when they're done with reviewing that, even the most casual person on the street that they may have crossed paths with and said a word to, then they go out from there. And because there is no time here, this is a place where time doesn't happen. There is no time. Every person that comes to this heavenly place will live the life of every person who's ever lived from the inside out. They'll live that book. They'll see it from the inside out. They'll understand every nuance. And so even a child that was aborted or died before birth is not denied the opportunity to know what the human experience is, to have lived it all, to seen it all, good and bad, and understand it at a completely different level. Now, this is a very young boy that's having this experience. And when he related that to me, that just had a ring to it that, that's the kind of thing God would do. And so I think of this situation that we're in as a country right now, and how we're acting, how we're being received, what's being done in our name against each other, brother against brother, in this almost kind of a civil war-like moment. And the question is, are we Nineveh? Are we under some peril of doom and gloom? Or are we Nineveh and we are on the brink of some type of revival, some awakening to turn and choose a different path? You saw President Trump last week when he left the White House. People are saying he's in his bunker, he's hiding out, he's hiding under the bed with a pillow over his head, he's scared to come out, No, he walks right out of the White House, marches down the street, and goes over to St. John's Church, where the rectory had been burned the night before by protesters targeting the church. Notice how they don't burn down their monument in the middle of the place or try to push it over. They go right to the church. Tells you whose side they're on, whose bidding they're doing. And what is President Trump? He's carrying his Bible and goes to church. And I think the symbology may have been lost on a lot of people. He didn't go there to deliver a speech. He wasn't there preaching. He held his Bible up and allowed the media to take some photos. What did he really do? What was the symbology there? Where we go one, we go all. And our president led the way, and we went to church. He delivered a message. We're not going to defeat these people with just political rhetoric. We're not going to convince a lot of these people with sophistry, with good presentations. We've done that before. Most of these people that we're having these conversations with are very knowledgeable about the arguments. They've just chosen a different path. And so when you're trying to outwit them, out explain things to them, debate them, you think you're talking to that person only? No, you're talking to all the programming that is there in their mind, in their heart, their soul. And they actually can't even, a lot of times, even hear you. They're just preparing their response. The demons on their shoulder grabbing at them, whispering in their ear. And the only way that you're going to get to them is by some divine, let he who has ears hear, let he who has eyes see. If you're fighting this battle merely in the physical realm, then you're going to lose. We came into this battle, as far as I'm concerned, in many ways outnumbered, not because the people actually believe a lot of this crap, but they're programmed, they're sheep, they're zombies, and they weren't awake, and they're just going through a national ritual of function. They've been so cut off from normal communications, like happens in cults, and all you get is the information inside the cult, and you start losing perspective. You don't think straight. And so we have a lot of people waking up. That's the Q project, waking people up, educating them, helping them to understand. But still, there is a moment where there's some divine awakening, some instant. And sometimes it comes early in life and you have a lot of life ahead of you and you have no concerns. The young girl that I mentioned at the outset of this presentation, 19 years old, whole life ahead of her, makes a change. Her father in prison and her mother in prison, and they make a change and a pact to get their family back together and to set right the wrongs in their life and choose a different lane, a heavenly path, not a hellish path. And she makes this right choice. And she starts making preparations to lock it in with the future and try to get the education to get the right job and enjoy her family and change everything about what she's doing. And she's visiting her friends, getting ready for the move, waiting at the bus stop, laughing, having fun, having some serious conversation, shared with her cousin that she'd changed her life and had chosen a heavenly path, and wants her to also consider changing her life and think again about the things that she was involved in. She went back into the coal mine after the mine shaft had fallen to save her friend, because that's what people of faith do. When you find out the right way, you don't just leave others, abandon them to this plight. You go back and you try to rescue them. And so she went and talked to her cousin and other girls at the bus stop. And then a few crackling shots, and she's on the ground, and she passed away 4 days after she accepted Christ into her life, in the prime of life. How could she have known? She had these premonitions, these near-death apparitions that were pulling on her. She was afraid. She saw it coming. And with only hours left in her life on this planet, in this world, was saved from that fate. We as a nation may think we have lots of time left, and we're going to sort out the stock markets and things like that, and get our retirement sorted out and save the country. Well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. I say we do, but it is going to be, some of us aren't going to make it if they don't make the right choice, and they're falling deeper into the abyss. One of the drug addicts who had a near-death experience, and she wasn't a horrible person, she just was a drug addict on a wrong path. In listening to her near-death experience, and she's being taken by the demons after she had this drug overdose deeper into hell, and saw horrible, horrible things, and the stench, and it was just beyond description. And she saw people who had made pacts with the devil. I believe one of them that she recalled, she talked about, because it was when she was growing up, it was Selena. And then she saw Michael Jackson, and he perpetually just had to do the moonwalk backwards, and was crying and asking him to let him stop and don't make him do it anymore and things like that. But he'd made his pact. And she was being taken deeper and deeper into this place where she was going to spend eternity. And she, in the course of that, remembered having gone to a summer vacation Bible school thing when she was very little, and drawing pictures and praying. And she remembered and she prayed, Jesus, 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 please help me. Don't let me be here. And in her case, again, and it's interesting to me, I believe she recalled the same thing. It was Michael the archangel that came to her rescue and took hold of her away from these demons and brought her back out of hell. And she had this rest of this experience, this heavenly experience that she relates. And after it was all done, in the interview that I was reviewing, she said something that I thought was so profound. She said, "You don't understand. This place was so bad. It was so horrible that you wouldn't wish the worst person you could think of, the worst person you could imagine, the worst person who had ever lived. You wouldn't wish them to go to this place. It's that bad. If it was Hitler, somebody worse than Hitler, you wouldn't wish them to go to this place. It's that bad, because hell wasn't made for humans. It was made for demons. But if you choose to go there, you'll experience what was meant for them, with them." And we have a lot of people at this moment in the movement, in this truth movement, in this Q movement within the country, and I hear it too frequently. and they're cavalier about damning certain persons that have done very evil things within the country, that have done wrong in the world, damning them to hell, glad to be the one to pull the trigger, to be the hangman, to send them to hell. But one of the things is, I remember also a gang member, and he had turned his life around, and he was a very evil person. And he said, but Jesus told me he loved me my whole life. He always loved me. Another one, Mr. Ramirez, who was a Satanist, and changed his life. And he's out there in the YouTube presentations. You can listen to him also. And he said the same thing. He said, Jesus told him he always loved him. Obviously didn't love the things he was doing, but God's love never departed from him. He always wanted him to come around and wake up. He doesn't wish it. Another person that talks about, he saw people falling into hell, and he could feel, he knew it intuitively, that God winced with each person that went to hell. He didn't, that wasn't his plan. That wasn't his desire. God himself didn't wish them to hell. These people made a choice. Sins of commission, sins of omission. You have to make a choice. And choosing to do good, to pull America out of this death spiral, this doom that they want for us, this hellish determination they have for us as a people, as a nation, because we block the way on their path to hell on earth. We have to, by action, by decision, by choice, choose the heavenly path, and then help the ones around us, not wishing them to hell. And even some of those that will go to prison for the rest of their life in this world, it would be my prayer that many of them will not go to prison for eternity in hell, that some of them will have their prison encounter with the living God and be saved. Just as this drug addict dealer became a Christian and then came back for his whole family, his wife and his children and his daughter, in the last days, hours of her life in this world. And because of his making a change, she was saved. A lot of these people have children, relatives, others. And what will happen with them? I don't wish evil on any of them. They are deceived. Many of them were raised in deception. Before they were even born, they were under deceptions. Doesn't mean I want them loose on the streets, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to go pet the nice puppy that's got rabies. They're dangerous, they're lethal, and they can kill you in an instant, and they want to kill this country. They must be taken under control, stopped from the things that they're doing, stopped from the evil that they intend on the whole world if they get their way, because they're under the control, involved in a satanic enterprise. Many of them have sold their souls to the devil. We see it in the entertainment industry over and over and over, where they acknowledge, I made a deal with the devil for fame. Well, people make a deal with the devil for riches in industry, a deal with the devil in clandestine enterprises to get to the top, to be part of these secret handshake clubs. And they do things, the Skull and Bones crowd, dastardly evil things, pacts with the devil to get control, the Davos crowd, to control the whole world if they can do it, because they're in concert with, orchestrating with the devil himself. So in this moment, will we as a nation cry out to God while we're having this near-death experience, seeing the hell that's intended for us, that was created for us, that the devil dug the grave for us to climb into? Will we awaken and at the last moment, please God, save us. Please God, help us. Please God, don't let us go to hell here. Don't let us suffer this fate forever. And a whole world is hoping, needing us to come back for them. You hear people that have had a hellish experience, a heavenly experience. One man said that his son had heard he was about to die, had heard through the room into the next room when the doctor was explaining it that there was no hope, and ran down through the hospital. Young boy pulled the tape off his father's eyes, and his eyes were going different directions, all dilated out, obviously very gone. But he called out to his dad, "Don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me." And somewhere on the other side of eternity, the father heard him, didn't even know who the voice was, couldn't put it together, but knew that there was some reason he had to find a way back because there was somebody that needed him on the other side. We have a whole world crying out that's in desperate pain, that needs America to come back from this near-death experience, to help them through it, to choose a heavenly path. This battle that's ahead for us, this Armageddon, people forget. They think this evil entity, this crowd that's supposed to take over the whole world, and we're all completely subjugated to it. You know, the Antichrist, after he takes his throne in Jerusalem, according to all this stuff, do you know he has to flee because of enemies coming after him? Well, where do those enemies come from? God still has a representation in the earth, even in those dark times. We're here for a reason. Why would God build a whole army of believers and then beam them out at the last second, at the greatest conflict in the history of man? This is our planet. It was given to Adam and his seed. You have to own that. You have to make that choice and own that. This is our planet, and we're not giving it over to evil men and evil enterprises who are sold out to Lucifer, the devil, Satan, by 1,000 names, Isis, Osiris, sun god worshippers, Saturnus, 1,000 names. The devil's hiding behind all of them. It's the same devil. We have to ask God in a very personal way to save us as a nation, individually, each one of us. And it's a numbers game. If enough of America is revived in their soul, in their heart, in what makes Americans Americans, personal responsibility, personal freedom, personal choice, and acting on it, then we can take our country back. Where we go one, we go all. And then go back and be salt and light to the world and help our brothers and sisters around the world. Not because we want to be our brother or sister's keeper. We want to be our brother or sister's brother and sister. Talking with a few friends, thinking about this message that I wanted to give, and several of them offered their own experiences when loved ones passed or had near-death experiences, and some of them were amazing. Uh, one man whose wife came back to tell him what was ahead. She was going to pass, saw her end, but wanted him to know things about what was going to happen in this world and what was there for him, things he needed to know about the future for himself to do that she had seen. Other people, talked about these visions they had, good and bad. There's a scripture that says, without a vision, a people perish. What vision do we as a community, within this Q community, within this truth community, within this patriot, where we go one, we go all community, what vision do we have for America moving forward? Do we have a clear vision? Without a vision, a people perish. Do we have a vision that includes not just getting crime off the streets and getting the illegal vote under control, or the economy sorted out and retirements and healthcare back on a right track, but a vision that is a godly vision where your children and grandchildren can grow up and live a life of their choice, not some machine choice. It's not some managed choice that suits the machine's needs for who's going to do what any given day. There's a sliver, almost like a neon light, sliver of light that I see ahead for America. They had dark apparitions pulling at us and trying to pull us into this dark place. But we have beautiful things that can come for America out into the future, and we can be a light to the world and do great things for the world with our technology, with our knowledge, with our wealth, which we'll take back. But do we have a vision doing that? Can we see ourselves doing that? Can we visualize ourselves with this bright future? And if we can, is God included in that? Because apart from that, it's really not a bright future. It's an illusion. It doesn't have meaning. Some people have to see it for themselves to make the choice. Till the apparitions, the night terrors showed up for Monica's father, he wasn't compelled to make that choice. Till these events taking place across America with these persons, these groups, trying to destroy and burn down the cities across America. Was it real enough for people to say no and make a choice, pick a lane, heaven or hell, a bright future or a dark future for America? Lots of people, I mentioned it in an interview a while back, of someone that was doing some work on the boat. And he said, he's not a Q person. He's not a truther person. He's just an average guy. He was actually a Democrat. And he said when he realized that Hillary was going to win the election, he talked to his wife and he said, I'm going to get some supplies because I'm concerned. And he went out and bought all sorts of supplies and started getting ready for what he thought was going to be this catastrophic period in America. He had a piece of property in another part, a remote part of the country, and within a gas tank's worth of gas away from his house. And he went there and started outfitting it and got it set up and got a situation where they have a living situation. It was that dark for him. And he did all of that because he, from a Christian standpoint, a heathen, from a Republican standpoint, a heathen, saw something horrible off out in the future, and he couldn't stomach it. And even now, he said the other day when we talked, he says, you know, it was like a wake-up call to me and my wife. And over time, we've started to realize what's going on. He says, you know, I'm not even the same person I was 3-4 years ago. I'm changed that much. Once I made that decision to start going a different direction, and then I started to see this stuff, and now I totally get it. And he is happier, he says, and he has a certain comfort because he feels as though he knows the truth now, and he knows what was being done, and he sees hope that we're actually going to get this back on track, and that even though it looks like it's slow to happen and it's not happening quite right, he said, but you know what, that feeling that I have this opposite feeling. Even though these riots are taking place and there's all this other stuff, I can feel it. The country's coming back, because what I see in the media and what everybody's talking about, and if I go online and all that, he says, but when I talk to people around me, talk to people I work with, and this is a professionally, you know, incredibly good at what he does, one of the top mechanics in the world for a very specialized type of engine. And he said, you know, they can say anything they want. I can feel it. We're coming back. And even if they don't believe it, I believe it. My wife believes it. And we were the ones that were ready for the end of the world. We were getting ready for the end of the world. I can feel it the same way, but to the opposite direction. And it's just like Monica's dad, suddenly realizing that all this weight of a whole lifetime on this path and all the investment, that when he made the turn, Jesus, as loud as he could say it,
Amen.
eternity ahead of him, he knew that there was a bright future. He had a vision. He saw it. And he lived in that to the end of his life. He was so happy. We have a sliver of light. I can see it. It's a small light out in the distance, but it's a bright angel coming for America. And we have to latch on to that. I see revival coming for America. It's a very personal thing. You can have big churches and everybody comes down forward and all sorts of things. But this choice of heaven or hell, it's not a joke. It's very personal. And nobody else can do it. And that includes as a nation. Every citizen makes that choice. I'm not going to participate in destroying my own town, my own neighborhood, my own future, the job of my neighbor. I'm not going to talk it down. I'm not going to let people get away with the dark speech in my name or my neighbor's name. And, you know, they hate our flag. They want us to worship their flag, their Antifa Nazi flag. And they're extolling all the values of criminals. That's, and destruction. That's demented. It's demented in any universe you might live in. Hell is a place where reason doesn't exist. There is no logic in hell. It makes no sense. As soon as somebody wants to explain to you why hell's a good choice and everything else, and wants to explain to you the logic of choosing the devil, it's illogical from the outset. It's illogical to choose hate over love, destruction over building. There's no logic to that. Hell is a place where there is no reason. This rioting that's captured America, where's the logic? You're going to get rid of the police? Where's the logic? On whose planet does that make sense? we have to bring logic back into the discussion. You know, I talk about this breaking the 8 ceremony. And by the way, when the lightning bolt that everybody has seen in this audience struck the Washington Monument last week, and Dan Scavino sent out that picture, that little GIF of the lightning striking Washington, D.C. and the Washington Monument. The Q post that they used was Q post 4419. And I've said this breaking the 8 ceremony, this 4-4 ceremony. What's the 8? It's symbolic of the infinity sign, and so endless time. And so when you break this infinity sign, this 8, the symbology is that you're opening the veil, the curtain that separates this spirit world, this eternal world, separates it from the physical world of 3 or 4 dimensions, depending on how you want to explain it. And so physicality and spirituality cross over freely one side to the other. But is it a good spirit or an evil spirit that's getting access to us so that we're going to? And these crowds that we're in opposition to, who try to own the day, these destructive people who've sold their soul to the devil, in all of their symbology, in their videos, in their music videos and commercials and things like that, they're constantly showing you imagery of breaking the veil, breaking the glass, the mirror, the separation between the spiritual and the physical, to let these demons in to walk among us and to take us to their hell. That's this breaking the 8 ceremony. And when this lightning struck, and it was shown and posted in Q post 4419, the 19 is the power number of the other physics. It's representative of the other physics beyond nuclear. And it's an important symbology, because here's this power in the breaking the 8, and it's noted in this Q drop 4419. They have tried to drive a stake into America and destroy America. And as I said on your show and other shows, we'll know that God is on our side, that we're on God's side, that we have rounded the corner as a nation when God strikes and breaks the monument in stone, this stake in the heart of America for all the world to see. That's not done yet, but the symbology, the imagery, the start is there. And I believe that that's a sign for all of us that this spiritual war that we're in, we're all in. It's real. And more real even, you know, something that other people talk about in these near-death experiences. If we as a nation are having a near-death experience as a nation, people that have had a near-death experience talk about how real that moment was, heaven or hell, that it's more real than this world. The colors are more intense. The darkness is more intense. The sensation, the smell, everything is more intense. The vibrations, the frequencies. In this moment as a nation, we're having a very intense moment. And we need to listen to what's being said to us in the spirit realm in this moment, and consciously, one foot in front of the other, make a choice. It's like we talked about in the Esther video, biblical, and I did over at Patriots Purim with Space Shot 76. We're going to be in conflict right up to the election, and then that's the day we have it out. And we choose heaven or hell, heavenly path, hellish path. Once and for all, we're going to have it out. And then those people that are all about handing over America to globalists, to destroying America and handing the burned out carcass to these evil entities walking around in human skin, whose hearts are colder than stone, harder than stone. We have to make a choice, and that's this moment that we're being given. When people have a near-death experience, they're given a glimpse and allowed to come back, consider it, and lock it in, make their choice. We're being given that opportunity. It's a gift. We may have been asleep. We may not have been paying attention. We may not have understood. May have had 1,000 trances thrown on us by this machine, these people, to distract us, to weigh us down, to keep us mentally enslaved. But you're being woken up by circumstances. And once your house is clean and swept out and ornamented, and we've sorted some of this stuff out, will you have made a choice and filled this American house, this national house, with a godly presence? Or will it be empty and void, just looking good, new cars, new shiny everything, but open and ready for the demons to come back 7 times stronger and reoccupy it? This is for them, the way they see it, magical moment. For us, this is a spiritual moment, a divine moment, an altar call moment. And America needs to walk down the aisle and choose correctly, just as that young girl did. Heaven or hell, right or wrong. That's my prayer for America. I hope everybody prays with us to continue this fight. Pray for the president, pray for his family, pray for those people that are waging the good fight, those patriots that have come out and taken a stand. Stand with the American flag. Stand with God in prayer for the soul of America. This is an awakening, revival moment. And this is about scriptures. This is our revolution, our second revolution here as a nation. We're going to throw off those British oppressors that tried to take down our president, that are working through their minions here into the country. We're going to throw off those demonic entities, those principalities that have a stake in the heart of America, right into our capital and all of their minions. And we're going to pray through that all their evil designs on America, all their evil plots, all their evil players are exposed, laid bare. Their crimes against America, against the world, done in our name. And children and those who have done those crimes against them are forever barred from the shores of our country, never to rise up again. This cauldron that they had planned to throw us into as a nation and a world will be broken and crushed and left as a spectacle for all generations against evil and those who perpetrate it. That's what I got for you, Jennifer.